Sometimes when people talk about adult animation, they tend to think about exactly that with cynicism and kind of just some like shock or violence, but it doesn't really convey what it is to be like an adult.
Hi, I am Jose Roberto Landaverde from Cine Premier in Mexico. It's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
I wanted to start with a question about how do you create a film that can ignite so much a sense of wonder in a time where there's not many films which can do that anymore?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's about kind of where you feel like you've never seen this before. For that reason, these places that they visit in the story, they're not like anything real from our world, but we kind of made our own environments. Our goal is to create something that feels grounded and believable, but also something new. I think also because we're experiencing this from this cat's point of view, it makes everything seem much more bigger and also not just bigger but also more emotional and intense. Like I think the stakes are higher and we just I think we care more about what happens to animals than humans in a story like this, so that makes it more emotional. But like also just the filmmaking, how it's framed, how we use the camera in this film to kind of immerse yourself into the film. You're not just like looking at these events from a distance, like the camera is very close to the characters. And I think this helps the immersion, but also creates this sense of intimacy. So I think it creates this sense of wonder, or what you meant. I think that's because we care for the characters. Because if we wouldn't care for the characters, it doesn't matter how big the sets are or like how epic the music is or whatever. It's really all these images are there to kind of help us understand what the characters are feeling, what's inside their heads. So that's really the most important aspect, I think.
What was your approach to creating a film starring animals, but that mostly speaks so much about where we are going as a society and about the human experience? How do you create that dichotomy?
Yeah, that was a central kind of theme that was important for me to explore kind of the individual versus the society, not really judging anyone, but kind of trying to explore both the benefits and the disadvantages of both of them. So we see the cat kind of learning to trust others throughout this journey. It starts out being this very independent character, but I wanted to show also the opposite, where there's this dog who learns to be more independent, to kind of find like I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, and I try to avoid kind of a didactic message, just saying that this is the right way and the other way is wrong. But yeah, this is something that I think I've been exploring in other films as well. I don't even know what the right answer is, but I'm kind of trying to figure it out by making these films.
Well, I think this film can also be labeled as experimental. So I wanted to ask you, do you consider yourself as a person who likes to experiment and who likes to find new ways to tell stories? And if so, what are your favorite approaches to storytelling?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for considering this as being experimental, because I did want to make something that felt kind of unique, where how we're kind of creating these images doesn't feel that we're just following some formula. So we don't have like the standard close-ups and wide shots and the standard kind of story beats. Each of the shots to be very kind of specific to the certain emotion I need to achieve. I'm not really like trying to like force a technique onto the story. The story influences the technique, so each shots might be very different. There are some moments where I use like these very long shots where the camera is following the characters. But there are certain moments where I tried to use this technique, but it didn't really fit that moment. So I think I have to be kind of flexible and to be able to break my own rules. So we didn't use storyboards, for example. I would just kind of design these scenes in 3D, just because that's the way I was used to working. And it was easier for me to convey my ideas. So yeah, it's important to not to be too rigid and to be open to kind of spontaneous improvisation, I think.
To wrap up, I wanted to ask you, do you think a film like yours can open conversations about the ability of filmmaking as an opposition to a dark world, or how do you approach the theme that a film can be an antidote to dark times?
Yeah, sometimes when people talk about adult animation, they tend to think about exactly that with cynicism and kind of just some like shock or violence, but it doesn't really convey what it is to be like an adult. So we try to be very honest. We're kind of showing that yes, you can find hope and improve things, but like it's not that easy to create some simple happy ending and everything is solved. I think it's about finding the honest truth, which is somewhere in the middle.
Well, thank you very much, Gintz, for the time. It was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. These were great questions.